Thank you, JP, and thank you so much also to Susanna and Hans and Porter. So now we're going to do a little bit of discussion and Q&A. I guess from a quick time check perspective, JP, like would it be reasonable, like say if we went for about 10 minutes at this point, or how much time would
Yeah,
you?
I think that's fine. Most of the people that remain here, and there's still a significant number, are interested in this topic. I don't want to short them on it. And for those who have to leave, again, this is recorded and it'll be posted anyway. You can watch it later. So have at it.
Cool. So I'll start with a question for the group, but if people have questions they're interested in, please chat those in, and we'll turn to those after I ask a question first. And so the question I have to start with is recognizing many people on here listening are physicians themselves. What one piece of advice would each of you have for a physician who's interested in trying to put in place like one of these types of financial alignment structures with their organization that they work for? Like, how would you suggest they go about getting started? And maybe we can start and just sit down and go through people in the order which they spoke.
Yeah, well, really quickly, I think this covers a lot of what I introduced with my initial talk. I think that if you want to institute a different type of compensation or start to look into changing the ways that compensation is designed and administered in your organization, you need to start thinking about first and foremost, what do you want to accomplish? And so if you can find uh, you cannot find alignment if you don't have a direction. So I think it's very important to have clarity on what the ultimate goal of that compensation plan needs to be. Many organizations, if it is perfectly okay if your organization decides that you want to maximize revenue, that is a valid objective. You can choose whether that's a good objective for your organization or not, or if you want to prioritize other things. But until you know what you want to prioritize, it's really difficult to start talking about the compensation structure.
Thanks. Turn to Hans.
So my advice would be to, this was important to me before presenting this to the system to try to get a decision about it, was to have an extremely well-baked plan so that we had thought thoroughly about how this would be implemented, over what time frame, exactly how much we would aim to gain share, and before putting it in front of anybody, because I felt like that was the way that we could control, the decision that would get made. And lo and behold, they really liked our plan because it looked good for them, just like it looked good for us. And I think that helped a lot. I think if we had gone to them and said, "Well, we think we want to do a gain share," well, then we've lost the ability to drive what that plan becomes. So,
Great, thank you. Porter or JP?
Yeah.
Porter, you go ahead.
Yeah, Hans, I think that's interesting. When we went through that process, once we decided what we were aligning on and wanted to accomplish, as we were going through it, we made sure that we had the CEO and the CFO at every internal meeting. So it was the clinical staff and high level executives. Obviously we had a plan as well, but we found it super important for everyone just to be in lockstep as we're going through the process. We probably spent a little longer. We spent about 6 months going through meetings and tweaking and discussing and really defining what we wanted to do. But having that core steering committee to analyze, review, and then be part of the implementation group was very important to make it successful.
Just a comment on my end. We have some people from our organization here, and as this organization is changing into what is now known as MGB, this may be an opportunity for alignment and moving in the right direction. Lord knows we have case examples of how well that can work. Personally, I think culture can change along with the organization in a favorable way that benefits the physicians and the organization. This is an opportunity, and the time is right to take advantage and not ignore that situation. In fact, the compensation plan has moved exactly in the opposite direction, and Susanna pointed that out. And I think we now have issues of burnout and et cetera that are going to be problematic if we don't move in the right direction. I know Bob Kaplan's on here, and at least I want to call out Bob because years ago, Bob and I and others from the value-based care group had a collaboration with one of the local insurers to do exactly this, have a value-based payment model that would incentivize outcomes and guarantee those outcomes, just as Codman would have done. And we went to leadership of our organization, admittedly different leadership than what we have now, and it was crickets after that. And, you know, it's wonderful to see how things are working elsewhere. It's disappointing to see how they're not working where I am. And at the end of the day, I think there's a message here that can be carried back to leadership of our organization that now's the right time to make these changes since they're working elsewhere. Bob, any comment on that? I know you're on here with us.
No, you're bringing back a little bit of a sad memory because we had many meetings starting early in the morning for my time, late for a surgeon, but and we hammered out the plan, as you said, between the surgeons and the insurer. They were willing to take a chance on a bundle payment, and he visited the CFO, and he had no interest in it. So that was discouraging. Well, we got to write one paper about it.
Okay. Well, so yeah, thanks for sharing those thoughts. And then, yeah, again, if people have questions, feel free to chat them in. One other question, I guess, for discussion would be, there's a lot of discussion here around physician-hospital financial alignment. How do people think about, like, these same principles apply to other roles inside the organization as well? In what circumstances would you think it makes sense for, you know, other clinical administrative staff to have similar types of incentives around, you know, strong financial management?
Who do you want to direct that to there?
Anybody. Floor is open.
Fifth on that. Nobody wants to take that question. So go ahead.
I will. I'm a strong proponent of collective performance metrics. So healthcare, more than many other professions, is a team sport. And so if we don't include the administrators and the non-physicians and everybody else that works in the organization, if we want to talk about alignment, we need to align everyone. And so for me, if you are not there to contribute to the ultimate goal of the organization, why are you there in the first place? So we have to assume that everybody has a role to play. I really love that short story of, you know, when President Kennedy went to NASA to visit the facilities and asked a janitor that was sweeping the floor what his job was. And his answer was, I'm putting a man on the moon. And this is the kind of mentality that we want to have, right? Everybody has a role to play in the ultimate, to achieve the ultimate strategic goal. So I'm a big fan of incentivizing everybody for collective performance.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, I mean, the corollary in business is stock options, you know, and that's not something that we've figured out a way to do in health systems. But I think that, you know, CEO compensation and C-suite compensation in other industries is very much tied to the performance of the organization. And you know, we need to start to think that way. That's what this finds a foundation in for me, is, you know, this is the performance of the group and the performance of us as a team. And I think at every level, it should be, you know, it should be tied to the compensation. Absolutely. You know, I think part of the way that it was presented on my end.
Yeah.
Just.
Yeah, I'm pretty much done.
Sorry, go ahead, Hans.
No problem. Just to sort of close the loop on the way that it was presented to leadership of my system is, and having a fully sort of baked plan. And I think that the reason that worked is because they had already bought into the way that I had managed some other pieces of the department and collaboratively changing alignment and the culture on standardization and driving costs down in those ways. And I think part of the way that it was sold was, you know, this is how I feel that we need to compensate the group for the collective efforts that are being made to drive high reliability to the way that we're doing things and making decisions both clinically and financially.
Yeah,
Great.
and I think it's interesting that the idea of this compensation, I mean, in the end, it's all financially compensated. One thing I would suggest is, sure, the financial health of the institution is very important, but layering in additional items as part of that model, you know, whether that be research, outcomes, as I'd mentioned, we did, you know, we had metrics for education, we had metrics for philanthropic work. We wanted, you know, for our incentive structure and what we wanted out of it, it was more than simply just cost. And so that came over time. But I think it is important to also look at what else is important to the department in regards to metrics that want to be achieved outside of just simply the financial component.
Thank you, Porter, and thank you so much to Susanna and to Hans and to JP as well. I think that concludes the first section here this evening, and turn over to Ira and JP if we want to do a quick break or move on to the second section.
I think maybe moving on is probably a good idea.
Absolutely.
Given the hour, so people probably, depending what time zone they're in, they probably, you know, want to move along, and we have their attention now. So let's move forward.
All right, so we're going to go on to the next section.